In this episode, we're talking about how you can alter the psychology of patients in order to grow your perceived value and ensure that it's easier to transact with you more frequently. I'm going to share the 5 big things that you can do that are super practical, cost nothing to implement, that will ensure you're organically the iconic community that the patients you like working with naturally gravitate towards. Roll the titles. Welcome to the Business of Hearing podcast, the #1 marketing and practice growth podcast for high-performing private practice hearing care leaders. It's Friday, and this is my end-of-week roundup of what's top of mind after 7 days of helping some of the world's best private practices to attract high-quality patients, fight the evil forces of manufacturer-owned chains, and be impossible to compete with. My name's Ollie Luke. Pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink, and let's have a chat. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Hearing podcast. It is Friday and once again you join me in my local pub as we talk about what's top of mind after several days of working with some phenomenal private practices. And today I want to talk to you about how we can alter psychology and alter behaviors in order to ensure patients have a higher perceived value of you, spend more money more often, and your job becomes significantly easier. Which sounds quite good, right? And as always, looking to repay every minute you spend with me as much value as possible. So let's jump straight into this. And look, I'm going to get into these 5 things that are very specific and practical that we can do in our industry in order to get some big benefits that cost hardly anything to implement. But first, let's just talk about this altering psychology, because there's some big examples here from outside of our industry that we can utilize in order to truly understand this. And I'm going to start with Ferrari. Now, we're all familiar with Ferrari, right? The Italian car brand. Spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a car, drive around like you're the big dog. We won't go much further than that. Now, what they did in Europe, which I find really interesting, is if me in the UK right now says I want to order a Ferrari, I could order it, and it would get delivered to my house. So the truck would pull up, the Ferrari would come off the back, all my neighbours would look in awe and envy at me in this Ferrari that wouldn't fit on my driveway because of the hill and slant. Anyway, now what Ferrari did was they realised, well, this is pretty expensive, right? If we want to send a Ferrari to the UK, we've got to make it in Italy, we've got to get it on a truck, we've got to get it overseas, and it's a cost, and a pretty significant cost that they can't control in many ways with different shipping fees, etc., and things outside of their control. So one thing that they did, which is super smart, is they said, okay, what we're now going to do is allow you to collect your Ferrari from us, and it's going to cost you €500 to do so. Now, what's interesting about that is they shifted a cost for them into a profit center in their business, a very small profit center, but all their cost saved, plus that €500 on top. And the way they did this was, you come and collect from the factory, we'll give you a tour of the factory, you'll be able to see all our old Ferraris to our new ones, and it becomes an experience. You collect it and then you drive it home. As a result, a bunch of people now buy the Ferrari and go, well, I'm getting a flight over to Italy and I'm going doing the factory tour and collecting my Ferrari straight off the production line. Like, that's a really smart way that they've changed the psychology of how somebody gets a car and builds it into an experience where they make a huge amount more money. And it's just a little smart move. And really, if they would have said, come and collect it yourself, it would have felt like lower perceived value. The fact they turn it into an experience, higher perceived value. So that's a really solid example of altering the psychology in order to change behaviors. I'm sorry to interrupt the episode, but I have a little message for you, and that is on October 29, I'm hosting a special online event all focused on how you go from unknown to well-known in your community, and I'll share the 9 steps of how you can go from the best kept secret to the iconic go-to practice in your community. We'll talk about the Apple transition, we'll talk about the baby boomer transition that is occurring, and I'll share exactly what's working now for some of the best practices in the world. This is a brand new training. We're limited to 100 attendees, and if you want to join, go to orange-grey.com/invitation and I'll see you there. Oh, look at like the Michelin as a company, a tire company who started the Good Food Guide many moons ago. Like, that is a very weird move when you break it down, right? Why was a tire company building a way for restaurant reviews? And if you understand why they did it, it's super smart, because Michelin at the time realized that we sell tires, and the way that we sell more tires is people using the tires. Now, how can we get people to drive more often, therefore use their tyres? Well, let's start a good food guide. Throughout urban parts of France, let's develop a way that we review restaurants, give them certain amount of grades and say, this is a phenomenal restaurant, it's in the middle of nowhere, you need to go and travel to it, and create this good food guide, which essentially says to their customers and to the wider world, these are the best restaurants in the world, go and drive a few hundred miles and visit it, it's amazing. As a result, that changed behaviors, right? People go, they get in their car, they drive, they need new tires more often. It constantly feeds their production of tires and their sales of tires. Now, Michelin star grade restaurants has become something global, but it all started with that. And it's a little smart idea in order to go, how do we do something over here in order to benefit the core company? And then you look at like Henry Ford, right? Now, Henry Ford was the first person to introduce a 40-hour work week in a time where 40-hour work weeks didn't exist. Now, why did he do that? Because that was a weird move to make for your thousands or tens of thousands of employees that he had at the time. Why would he say, stop working these 80, 90-hour work weeks because there's no government rules to establish what a work week should look like, only work 40? And it's because he realized that people didn't have leisure time, right? Generally in his workforce, the men of the work wasn't traveling enough. They weren't having downtime in order to travel with their family. Therefore, car production, car purchases were somewhat limited. He knew that as one of the most influential employers in the US, if he could implement a 40-hour work week, it would buy his staff time in order to have leisure time, therefore travel, need an automobile. As he did that, it then forced, I think it was 3 years later, the US government then actually established 40-hour work week is now a limit that needs to be swept across the nation. And it was all as a result of going, what can I do that alters this behavior that ensures that my business flourishes more and more? So like they're the big famous examples. But let's modernize it and bring it down to hearing care. Because on a practical level, there's 5 things that you can do within your practice that will alter the psychology around what you do in order to either heighten the perceived value, i.e. a patient gives you this much money and sees the value significantly higher than the amount they give you, or change buying behaviors that mean they buy more often, buy more frequently, pay more money, etc. And here's the first one, and it's a super simple one, and I will say that hardly any of these cost any money to implement, it's just a little bit of time and energy. The first one is appointment names. Now, here's the challenge, right? We're always trying to create the narrative that we are distinctively different than any other practice. Like we deliver hearing care, everyone else delivers hearing aids. We're different than manufacturer-owned chains. We're different than Costco's. Yet from an appointment name perspective, we sound very, very similar. Like you and I know you do distinctively more than anybody else. Yet if we explain to a patient what happens, it's like, okay, you come for your fitting, and then you'll have a follow-up appointment, and then another follow-up appointment, and then if you need anything, you clean and checks every 3 months, 6 months, an annual hearing eval. And there's one little subtle change that you can make here in order to increase perceived value. And that is changing the names of your appointments. Because let's be honest, follow-up appointment is the most uninspiring name in the world. And it's probably the same name that anybody else would use that a patient may be able to choose other than you. Now take that as a consideration. What could we do rather than using the name follow-up appointments? Well, how about this, right? You fit the patient, they go away into their own world with their new devices on. Rather than follow-up appointment being the name that they know they're coming to, why don't we just rebrand that appointment to real-world optimization? Like all of a sudden now, you're building a unique process. You've got a unique value process that the patient understands that what they get from you is significantly different to everyone else, and you build a patient journey. So first follow-up appointment is real-world adjustments. Second appointment could be technology optimization. And it's like, okay, let's look at how this is working for you. Let's explore if any accessories would benefit you. But all of a sudden, your appointments now have a purpose, and it's a unique system that is unique to you that they can't get anywhere else. Now, this grows perceived value because what the patient can see that they're getting now is not, I'm buying hearing aids plus service, but I'm stepping into a methodical process of how this audiologist, this provider is going to allow me to achieve better hearing. And it's these multiple steps that are not just follow-up, but are instead, we've got a technology optimization, we've got real world adjustments, we've got this, we've got this, we've got this. They've all got their unique names, which means the expectations are cleaner for the patient, the value is higher, and it creates a big, big point of difference for you. Like, that is such a simple thing to implement. It just takes the effort in order to lay it out inside a patient journey, explain it to the patient, and naturally use that language internally also. Second thing that you can do, and I think every practice should implement this, and this is value enhancing invoices. And let me explain this to you, right? So when I bought my car, I signed up for kind of a service plan. It's like, okay, do you want to pay every month and you'll get this service plan? So once every 6 months, once a year, you can bring your car in for a service. We'll change the oil. We'll do whatever else they claim to do. And what I found super interesting about that is I pay monthly for that. And when I took my car for a service, at the end of that service, they gave me a little booklet. And the little booklet had all the things that could be done at a service, and they checked with a little pen every single thing that was done, and it had the amount that it cost next to it. Now, I read that and I see, wow, I've had $800, and I'm hypothetical making that number up, $800 worth of value from this service, and I'm only paying $35 a month. Like, this is a huge win. And I just think that swept into our industry could be super valuable, because you have a bunch of patients, right, that access a service plan. They buy devices, they get a service plan, and as a result, they come to you, and they can come and spend 40 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes with you, and they walk away. And we need a way for them to know the value they're getting in those appointments. Because if we do that correctly, it means that when that service plan expires, they now appreciate the value that's happened, and they'll either be more motivated to upgrade because they know a service plan is what they need, or they'll step into an extended care plan and say, I need to pay monthly for this because I don't want to pay out of pocket because it's pretty expensive for all the things that I get. And could you introduce an almost a fictitious invoice? And what I believe this looks like is a templated page that you can print and your providers have. And at the end of appointments, have your providers check all the things that were done in the appointment, hand it to the patient and ask them to give it to the front desk. What the patient's going to do is they're going to look at this, going to say, okay, here's my name, here's the date, here's the service plan I'm covered by, here's everything I've had today. The value of this should have been $410, but of course I'm covered by the service plan, so today's balance is $0. And they have a look at that, they hand it to your front desk. Your front desk don't have to do anything with it. This isn't like put it into the system and create extra admin. But what we're doing is subtly allowing the patient to understand the vast amount of value that they get at every single appointment. As a result of that, when that service plan expires, there's pain. And the pain is, I've had all this value and now I'm going to have to either pay for this, and it makes sense to either step into a continued care plan or to explore new technology and step into a brand new service plan. Like, just implementing that, which is a super simple thing to do, will ensure that we're altering the psychology of the patient so that they better understand the value that you bring as part of the service plan that they could take for granted right now because we're not constantly reinforcing the value that they're continually getting. The third one, and I've spoken about this many, many times, but this is packaging and pricing. Now, we know as an industry, one thing that we're also guilty of, right, is making the hearing aid the star of the show. The patient believes I'm getting a hearing aid plus service plus warranty, and that's pretty much how it's laid out. Annoyingly, it's the exact same thing as what Costco say the patient gets, what every manufacturer-owned chain says the patient gets. It's like, we're going to get you the widget, plus this year, plus a service plan, plus warranty. If you need anything, we're here for you. Like, your job needs to be in order to repackage that in order to articulate the care above the devices. Like, if you can do a good job with that so patient understands their options and it's like, okay, here's what we deliver. We think this treatment plan's right for you. We're going to get you premium technology, and here's the 15 line items of everything you're going to get. And that could be preventative maintenance checks, that could be the annual evaluations, pretty much everything you probably do for the patient, but you currently package under the label of service plan. If you can break that down and allow the patient to understand that, it's going to grow perceived value, because everybody else says, yep, you get these 3 things: devices, service plan, warranty, maybe L&D built into it. Like, here's 3 to 4 things that you get. They come to you and you're like, oh, here's the 16 things you're going to get, inclusive of the technology, inclusive of a great warranty, plus this advanced service plan. Shifts the belief of the patient, you're offering significantly more than everybody else, which makes you difficult to compete with. And it stops being a apples versus apples comparison to you and competitors. It's now apples versus apple pie because you offer significantly more. Just doing that, that's probably the easiest move in order to change the buying behavior of the patient so that they see higher perceived value in what you deliver compared to everybody else. Here's the fourth one, and I've touched upon this in my first point, is could you map out your patient journey? Because we know that from a patient's perspective, the more we educate them to know that this is a journey and not a destination, the better success we'll have with that patient, right? If they believe they get hearing aids and the solution, the outcome, what they dreamed of, what they hoped of is available immediately, then we're going to have an issue and we're going to be on the back foot trying to manage expectations. But if we can have the patient understand that, look, this is a journey to better hearing, it's not a destination, and like any long haul journey, we're going to hit bumps in the road. It might be uncomfortable at times, but you need somebody guiding you, driving the car that's going to make this a fun and enjoyable journey and as smooth as possible. Like, the better this will naturally become for the patient, better expectations will be set, better perceived value for you. And one of the most effective ways you can do that is, rather than explain to the patient at the appointment, here's what's going to happen, like, could you have an infographic that articulates this? Like, okay, here's where you're at today, and here's the next appointment in 2 weeks' time, which is your real-world optimization. Then we're going to have this appointment, which is the technology optimization. Then we're going to be here, then we're going to be here, then we're going to be here. And you map out the infographic to explain what this journey is going to look like for the patient. Now, this is essentially what you do now, but it's kind of made up as it goes along. Maybe that's not the right term, but that's how it may feel. Like, it's like, okay, come to this appointment, we'll do this. Come to this appointment, we'll do this. Like, the more we can say, this is the methodical structure and process of how we help you to achieve the outcome you're looking for. Here's where you're at on this journey. Then we'll get here, then we'll get here. The better it will look to the patient, the higher the perceived value of them understanding that this is a journey, not a destination. And then we've got the fifth thing. Hearing tests are something that super intrigued me, right? And I think Apple entering our industry is going to change this dynamic completely, because in an uneducated patient's mind, or a lack of awareness of somebody that's considering treating a hearing challenge, a hearing test is seen as a hearing test. Like, it's a bit of a commodity, right? It's just seen as, put something in my ears, it will tell me if I've got a hearing loss. And the more that you can explain and articulate what you do compared to everybody else as part of that hearing test, the more will grow the perceived value once again. And what I might mean by this is, if Costco offer a simple beep beep hearing test to determine if you need hearing aids, like, what is your hearing test? And you can't just say ours is better. You've got to prove it and document it. Like, I'm sure if I asked you, could you break down every single step of your hearing test, you'd be able to do a good job of that. Like, and I imagine that is 17 steps, 19 steps, 26 steps, 32 steps. Like, one of the steps is probably entering the sound booth, and we explain why that's important, what it means, why it's beneficial to you as Mr. or Mrs. Patient. But if you can truly break down, here's our process of how we do a hearing eval, then it becomes completely different to what everybody else is doing. And this is really just documenting the truth really well in order to grow the perceived value. And like, I think if you can implement those 5 things, these all cost next to nothing to implement apart from time, right? If you can change the appointment names, if you can add these value enhancing invoices, if you can start mapping out a patient journey, if you can articulate what you do in as much depth as possible so it becomes almost obnoxiously long, the list of things you do compared to everyone else, this isn't expensive to implement, but it's work, right? But once the work's done, then this will be something that continues to repays you over and over again, because the perceived value that it will deliver, which means that you haven't actually got to deliver more value. You just do what you do now, but you explain it better and have these little things in place in order to grow that perceived value. You'll alter the psychology of the patient in order to better appreciate the work you do, better understand the advanced value that they naturally get from working with you, and gravitate towards you for these buying decisions. But I find this so interesting, right? Because most of the marketing discussion in our industry is not like, do these little things, these little tweaks here that are just going to make you naturally the logical person to choose and grow your perceived value. It's like, spend money on ads. It's do this advertisement. Now do direct mail. It's all these big things, but these really are the magic. and they're the magic that most people overlook. So if you can get these in place and then start looking at how can we get more patients through the door, then you're in a much stronger place. And I will add, like, these are the things that we do with our Inner Circle members, right? Most of this isn't like, here's the big whiz-bang marketing tactic. It's like, how do we ensure you're organically the iconic local community and you're constantly being positioned as a logical choice for the people that value the services like yours in the area. These are some of the little magic ingredients in order to make that happen. But I hope that's been helpful. I know there's a lot in that, a lot of like big picture stuff, talking about Henry Ford, through to like little practical things of print this, do this in your practice. But hopefully this has planted some seeds, given you ideas, and most importantly, giving you one thing right now that you're like, damn it, I am applying that right now. And that is where the magic will happen. That's where we'll see progress, right? So hopefully that's been helpful. Appreciate you joining me this Friday in my local pub, and I'll be back again next week with another episode. And there we have it. Another episode has come to an end, and I have a quick favour to ask. If you have found this helpful, then who do you know who should listen to this podcast? I strongly believe a rising tide lifts all boats, and right now, private practice needs to stick together to fight these big, gormless groups and these manufacturer-owned Goliaths that are looking to take market share from us. Consider who should be listening, pass on the word about the Business of Hearing podcast, and I'll see you again next week.